So, Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order is getting the hammer. It's being run through the gauntlet, and there are people that are saying the game, other than the bugs and the issues, is still a solid game and possibly a contender for Game of the Year. It may sound crazy that on, the very next few days after its release, while there are still bugs and issues, even after patches, to make mention of something like this. But before you jump on me or jump in my comment section, you also have to realize that if you played Elden Ring on PC on the very first few days after release, we had very similar issues. In fact, I still have my footage uploaded on YouTube where I fought the Tree Sentinel with terrible frame drops, terrible performance issues, and many people were having a lot of these bugs when that game released and the game dropped. Gamers overall play favorites. I'm not blaming anybody for doing it, but it is just the reality. You may have standards, but somebody else has standards and wants to spend their money the way they want to spend it. It is in this particular reality that we come to this particular side of saying, you know what? Anyone who now knows that this pattern of releasing video games, AAA video games, with potential performance issues is going to be something that hinders their enjoyment could just go ahead, wait, avoid spoilers, and then give the game about 17 days before it eventually comes to a place where the developers have ironed out whatever performance metrics may be going wrong and eventually get the game in a playable state. I say this because Jedi Survivor is getting hammered right now. I remember that, even other games like Gotham Knights had some small technical issues and got overly hammered, which is weird. And I feel justified for saying, Gotham Knights is going through its issues because its game is developed in a different way. And eventually the developers went ahead and, they patched their game. And I think the team at Respawn is going to also go ahead and, patch their game as well and get the quality that they're looking forward to. Now, when you kind of weigh all of this in perspective, you'll see that, the subjective experience is also another reality that must be addressed as well. Many of you saw my video that I just did a few days ago, and shout out to all of you who watched it about the fix that can help your game perform better, where you start the game in 720 and then while you're in game, you change the resolution. Somebody made a video of doing that. It actually worked for a lot of people. It worked for one of my computers, but it didn't work for my 4090. And somebody even in the comments said that their 4090 had no issues. Some people are having issues and some other people are having no issues at all when you actually look at the game. Even when you go back and look at the reviews for the game, many of you remember that the very first few days of the game releasing, it was filled with reviews of people who were having issues. But as time started to go on, we started to see that those particular issues were kind of isolated to at least a 50% or 40%, area in terms of the players who are having those problems. If you go on Steam right now, if it's actually something you want to look towards, because I know people will go ahead and say, well, if you look at Steam, at the time that the game first came out, it was only 20-something% of people that thought the game had positive reviews. That number has since gone up. About 55% now think the game, or rate the game in a positive light. So about 8,620 say they view the game in a positive light, and about 7,000 say they view the game in a negative light, where I'm sure most of it is pretty much performance issues. And the ones who are probably positive also have, maybe some of them have performance issues, but have decided that they're going to go ahead and still continue to give the game a shot and give the game a try. And this subjective experience is where this whole PC gaming comes into a whole different light and a whole different conversation. You see, in 2019, when Jedi Fallen Order, which is the prequel to Survivor, was released, we were still in the GTX era. That game, according to some people, had issues when the game first released. Believe it or not, I played that game. I had not a single problem playing the entire game. The game worked very well. Maybe I'd have a little bit of kind of shader pop in from time to time when I reach a new area, but it was so negligible. And at that time I was playing on a GTX 1080 Ti and the game ran phenomenally well, which is wild. Today I'm playing the game with basically the latest GPU and I cannot get good performance, and I'm laughing because the experience is subjective, because I'm not getting good experience while some people are. And I'm sure if I run the game on the 1080 Ti, I'll probably get good experience at 1080p, which is interesting because in that short period of a time from 2019, and it is short in the world of technology, to 2023, we've had major technological advancements in computer hardware. In fact, major changes in computer hardware paradigms. times. AMD came in the running for, better processors, better GPUs than what they had, but not being able to match up with Nvidia being able to basically surpass Intel at one time before Intel kind of woke up from their slumber and eventually came in the leagues and in the running. So all of this new hardware and all of this new requirements and new capabilities are still ahead of game development, because sure, they were probably working on these GPUs and some of them were already out by 2019, don't get me wrong, but many publishers were already dropping their games at that time and probably already working on the next game or just building their next game where they stopped, and probably not in a place where they can take advantage of all of these new technological pieces. So this is where the rub is. It's going to be hard for the next few games to release a game that comes out polished, big games anyways, that gives everybody that uniform performance on a PC platform. Now, if you even think about, even a game as recent as Hogwarts Legacy, sure, the game came out, everybody loved it, but that fan base, they love their game and they're quite biased. Even with the issues, they still kind of, push through it. But the game had some technical problems at launch. It wasn't unplayable. It wasn't broken. It wasn't necessarily uber crashy like some people have reported with the Jedi game. But it also had its problems. And gamers playing favorites basically said, we'll be able to go past this and enjoy the game. So I think this conversation right now has gone past, what is your game code about? I mean, I see the work that Digital Foundry does and so on and so forth. But to be honest, I'm disenfranchised by most of the work that they do. I don't know what, level of experience they have with game development. I have a little bit. I'm an amateur. I mean, I picked up a few YouTube videos and a few tutorials, and I've been working on them for a few years. Doesn't give me the right to say that, I know a lot about game development. But from what I've seen, I don't necessarily think that their conversations are really coming in to dial into the main cause of these issues, because you have to look at games from an individual perspective. Let me even give you a very interesting example. So I remember watching, kind of an episode of a Digital Foundry video where they talked about how game developers can allow for their games to run very well, especially the Unreal Engine 4 games. They were talking about this in light of Callisto Protocol and even some, I don't know if it was Hogwarts Legacy or whatever. It was another game that was on Unreal Engine 4 that just recently came out. And they mentioned something that the developers could do, which is actually use shader compilation techniques where the game will pre-compile a lot of its shaders to avoid stuttering and pop-ins and so on and so forth. Well, Jedi Fallen Order, or Jedi Survivor, has employed this particular method, and it still is not able to help with all of the issues that can show up when it comes to resolution and frame rates and CPU utilization and so on and so forth. You also see a game like Hogwarts Legacy, which also had something of that sort in the beginning as well. It's like these developers were listening to Digital Foundry and probably trying to implement these systems in their games. But I think the biggest problem that we're seeing is that the ambition of the games and the new hardware have not matched in their adaptation. So now players are going to be better served if they just wait maybe a week or two after a game releases to be able to ensure that there's much more ubiquity in how the game is running on different machines, especially on the PC side. Now, the conversation also stretches into the console aspect of things, because some people have reported that even on the console, the game is having a lot of issues. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't told y'all that these consoles are not the thing that they've been made out to be. These games are very ambitious. They're giving high-end PCs problem. You have to understand that the consoles are not necessarily going to be free unless they optimize specifically for those consoles and then develop a PC version of the game. This is a development intensive, strategy that many studios may or may not have what it takes to get done. Because if you think about the PlayStation 4, all of those performance metrics were pretty much done in a way that matched those consoles. And, when you scale down to 720 and 30 FPS, you were pretty much golden for the most part. But once you're going to a 60 FPS game, you're going into an entirely different game overall. Some people think it's just as simple as, just remove ray tracing and scale down the resolution and we should be able to come up with 60 FPS. But that's not how it works. There are optimization videos on Unreal Engine 4 that I can link here in the description for you so that you can watch for yourself and see if it's as simple as that. If you actually think that that's actually how things are done, then maybe, but the evidence shows that it doesn't really work like that. You really have to, tweak your game and design your game to be able to run smoothly as much as you possibly can in different areas. You have to make sure that your meshes, your assets, your elements, your code base is running smoothly. That dependencies, and you know what dependencies are? They're basically where a code base depends on another set of systems that have to kind of lean on each other and work together and take each other into account every given time. So all of these things are things that go into making your game run in these performance modes or performance metrics that people desire in today's day and age. So I'm in a very weird spot. I would love to see, Jedi Survivor do well. I would love to see the game do, phenomenally well, do better than its predecessor. But these different issues with technology are very wild. And I think what developers can do to somewhat, in a sense, mitigate this is to do what a lot of Japanese developers do. Lock their games at 60 FPS and lock it at a very reasonable resolution like 1080. Maybe do 720 on the consoles. And if people say things like, well, why aren't we getting all of these different, modes? Say, game's not going to perform any better if we gave you more of that. The way the Gotham Knights developers did it, it was a little abrasive. I mean, sure, their game had some issues even after locking at 30 FPS, but by and large, it makes sense now, more sense now anyways, when you see that this is probably what we're going to be seeing now with a lot of these, ambitious titles coming. And trust me, folks, these consoles, they're going to need a massive refresh, an overhaul for people to be able to get the consistent 60 FPS, or for developers to eventually learn how to manage their ambition in their video games to meet the console specifications. You see, the conversation used to be, they haven't tapped into the power of the Xbox Series X and the power of the PS5. And I used to laugh when people would make those statements. And I don't mean to mock or jest it. It's just a statement that comes from a place of where the marketing teams at Microsoft and Sony did a very good job in making people think that these consoles were that powerful. Sure, they're more powerful than the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox One, but not as powerful as you would think, especially when you're talking about like an RTX 2060, where people say, it's the same thing as a 2070. It's not. A PC processes data differently from the way your console processes data and processes video games. So sure, they may have similar specifications, but the way they will run their processes will give you multiple different outcomes. And then you put in physics and engineering on how cooling and heating is done, which your console is limited by the machines and the mechanics put in there. You get a small fan, you get a small cooler, and that's all you get. On a PC, I can put a big old cooler, I can overclock something and make that thing run like a, bad, I'll say another word that I shouldn't say on YouTube, and you'll get better performance. But you can't do that on your console because the laws of physics are, in a sense, saying that you shouldn't do it, else you want to nuke your machine in a sense. So all of this is really weird, and this is so wild, and I feel sorry for the developers, and I feel bad for people who were probably expecting to play the game and have not been able to, play the game in a better performance. But this is just where we are, where I think right now, even the reviewers who did not talk about the performance, I don't think they necessarily served their audiences well. But all this is still yet to come in terms of looking at the updates and seeing how the developers are working through things. They've put together a patch, which was 116 gigs or so, I think. That has fixed some things, but there are still a lot of issues that need to be addressed as well. We'll keep an eye out. I'll continue talking about this, but I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comment section. Thanks so much for watching the video. I appreciate you guys' time and audience. Hopefully we'll talk pretty soon in another one. Peace out.